The waterfront restaurant hummed with Sunday brunch energy, clinking glasses, soft laughter, and the distant call of gulls over the harbor. I arrived exactly on time, wearing a simple navy linen dress that fell just below the knee. Nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention. Yet the moment I sat down at the long table reserved for my mother's 60th birthday, I felt the familiar weight of their eyes. 8 of us around a table meant for 12. Empty chairs like quiet accusations. Mom sat at the head, radiant in a pale silk blouse, already holding court. My older brother, Victor, 37 and every inch the successful investment banker, raised his mimosa with practiced charm. His wife, Lauren, smiled tightly beside him, their 2 perfectly dressed children playing quietly with tablets. My younger sister, Chloe, 28 and freshly engaged to a real estate developer, kept checking her reflection in a compact. Dad sat beside Mom, nodding along as always. I was the last piece, the one who didn't quite fit. 60 years, Mom said, lifting her glass after the appetizers arrived. I never imagined I'd reach this day surrounded by such a beautiful family. The toast landed softly, but the undercurrent was already there. Every question directed at me carried an edge. "How's the little ocean project going, Alex?" Victor asked, his tone light but laced with dismissal. "It's going well," I answered simply, taking a sip of water.
Chloe leaned in.
"Still not dating anyone we can meet? You're 34 now. Time is moving." I kept my face calm. "I'm focused on my work right now." Mom set her fork down with a small clink. The shift in her voice was immediate. The tone she used when she had decided enough was enough. "Speaking of your choices," she began, eyes locking on me with cool focus. "Your father and I have been patient, Alexandra. Very patient. This independent phase has gone on long enough. Living alone in that tiny place by the water. Refusing to settle down. Keeping your job so mysterious we barely know what you do. You've isolated yourself from this family for years." I looked around the table. Victor studied his plate. Lauren checked her phone. Chloe reapplied lip gloss. Dad shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. "I've been building a life," I said quietly. "What kind of life?" Mom demanded. "One where you hide from us? Where you show up looking like you barely make rent? We want better for you, sweetheart. A real future. A husband. Stability. The kind of life your brother and sister have built." Victor jumped in smoothly. "We're saying this because we care. Family means sharing the same values. Sticking together. Not drifting off into some solitary existence." The words kept coming, each one sharpening. Dad finally spoke. "A woman needs security, Alex. You drive that old car. Live in that small cottage. You won't even tell us what you actually do every day. How are we supposed to be proud when we don't understand your choices?" Chloe added, her voice sweet but cutting. "There's no shame in struggling, but there is shame in pretending everything is fine when it clearly isn't." I sat very still, feeling the familiar coldness settle in my chest. They had constructed an entire story about me, the eccentric daughter who never quite measured up, the one who refused to conform. Mom leaned forward, her voice dropping into finality. "We've enabled this long enough. Until you decide to rejoin the real world, to make choices that show you value family, stability, and normal connections, we're done pretending your lifestyle is acceptable." The table went quiet. Victor delivered the final blow, clearly prepped. "We think it's best if you don't attend family gatherings for a while. Give yourself space to grow up and think about what really matters." I met Mom's eyes. "You're uninviting me from the family?" She didn't blink. "If you won't choose the life we raised you for, then, as far as this family is concerned, we have 2 children, not 3. You're making this choice, Alexandra. Not us." The words landed like stones in still water.
Public.
Final. Delivered at her own birthday brunch, while other tables celebrated around us. I reached for my purse, pulled out my card, and quietly paid the entire bill without a word. The drive back to my beach cottage felt longer than usual. The coastal road wound along the cliffs, waves crashing below in steady rhythm. I kept the windows down, letting the salt air wash over me. No tears came. Only a strange, quiet clarity, like the moment after a storm when the sky clears and everything looks sharper. I parked beside the small wooden house I had rented for the past 4 years. It wasn't much, 1 bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a deck that overlooked the ocean. To my family, it would look like failure.
To me, it was peace.
That first night I sat on the deck with a cup of tea, listening to the tide. My phone stayed dark for a while, then lit up in waves. Mom, this is not how a daughter behaves on her mother's birthday. Victor, we're giving you space. Use it wisely. Chloe, you made everything awkward. Again. I saved every message. Created a folder. Named it when the mask finally slips. The next morning I did something I hadn't done in years. I turned my phone to silent and left it on the kitchen counter. Then I drove to the small research lab where my real work lived. The team was already there when I arrived. Dr. Elena Torres, my mentor of nearly a decade, looked up from her monitor as I walked in. She was in her late 50s, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense, the kind of woman who had spent her career fighting for funding and respect in a male-dominated field. "You're early," she said, studying my face. "Rough night." I told her everything. The brunch. The criticism. The final words. "You no longer exist to this family." I didn't soften any detail. Elena listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "So they finally said it out loud," she said. "Good. Now you don't have to keep carrying the weight of their expectations." Her words landed like a steady hand on my shoulder. She had watched me build our technology from late-night sketches to patented systems that monitored ocean health in real time. She knew the grants I had quietly secured, the partnerships with governments, the impact that was growing every month. "You've been hiding your light for too long, Alex," she added. "Not because you're ashamed. Because you've been trying to protect something that was never going to protect you back." That afternoon, I threw myself into the work. We were finalizing the latest version of our deep-sea sensors, devices that could detect changes in water temperature, acidity, and marine life patterns faster than anything currently available. The data we collected was already helping coastal communities prepare for environmental shifts. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't the kind of success my family would recognize. But it was real. By evening, I felt steadier. I stopped at the small market on the way home and bought simple groceries. No one slammed cabinets when I came in late. No one asked why I wasn't married yet. The silence in the cottage was clean. A few days later, I decided it was time for a change of scenery. I answered an ad for a room in a larger house farther up the coast. The owner was Captain Margaret Maggie Kane, a retired Coast Guard officer in her early 60s. She lived in a weathered but solid house with a separate studio apartment above the garage. Maggie met me at the door, wearing practical boots and a faded jacket. Her handshake was firm. "You're the marine biologist," she said, not a question. "I don't do drama. Pay on time. Keep the noise down after 9. That's all I ask." The studio was simple, white walls, a big window facing the water, and the faint smell of salt and cedar. It felt like breathing room. "I'll take it," I told her. Moving in took one trip in my old Jeep. A few boxes of books and research notes. Some clothes. The few personal items I actually cared about. Maggie watched from her porch as I carried the last box upstairs. "Family trouble?" she asked casually. I nodded once. Something like that. She didn't push. The ocean doesn't care about family opinions. Neither should you. That first night in the new place, I sat on the small balcony with the sound of waves below. No messages from home had come that day. The quiet felt different now, not empty, but chosen. At the lab the next week, Elena pulled me aside after a long day of testing. "The latest grant came through," she said. "Larger than we expected. Your name is on the lead authorship. This technology is going to scale faster than we thought." I felt a quiet pride settle in my chest. Not the loud kind my family would understand. The kind that came from knowing the work mattered. Back at Maggie's house, I made a simple dinner and ate on the balcony. My phone buzzed a few times, more messages shifting tone. "Mom, your silence is hurting the family." "Victor, Dad isn't sleeping well." This is affecting all of us. I took screenshots and added them to the folder. Then I set the phone aside and listened to the ocean instead. For the first time in years, the weight I had carried, the constant need to explain myself, to shrink my ambitions so they wouldn't feel threatened, began to lift. They had disowned the version of me they invented. I was finally free to become the version I had always been. The week settled into a rhythm that felt both foreign and deeply right. I woke before dawn most mornings, drove to the lab while the coast road was still quiet, and lost myself in the work that had always grounded me. The latest sensor array was performing better than our models predicted. We watched live data streams showing subtle shifts in ocean chemistry that could help fishing communities adapt before crisis hit. Dr. Elena Torres moved between stations with quiet focus, occasionally glancing my way with a small nod of approval that meant more than any family praise ever had. At Maggie's house, the evenings were simple. I cooked basic meals on the small stove, ate on the balcony, and let the sound of waves fill the spaces where arguments used to live. No one questioned how long I spent in the shower. No one kept score of my choices. Maggie sometimes left fresh herbs from her garden on my doorstep without a word. Her silence was never loaded. It was just space. The messages from home kept arriving, but the tone had shifted from sharp commands to something closer to unease. Mom, your father keeps asking if we've heard from you. This silence isn't healthy for anyone. Victor, the family is starting to feel the strain. We need to talk like adults. Chloe, Mom cried during dinner last night. Are you really going to keep punishing us? I read each one carefully, then added them to the growing folder. I no longer felt the old urge to explain or defend. Their words revealed more about the hole my absence had left than about any real concern for me. I had been the quiet one who never challenged the family narrative. Now that I was gone, the narrative was cracking. One afternoon, Dr. Torres called me into her office. She closed the door and slid a printed report across the desk. The International Consortium reviewed our proposal, she said. They want to expand the pilot program to 3 new coastal regions. Your name is listed as lead inventor on the patent filings. This is going to be big, Alex. Bigger than we planned. I stared at the numbers. The funding would allow us to deploy hundreds more sensors. The data could influence policy in countries that had never had real-time ocean monitoring before. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't the kind of success that made headlines in the society pages my mother read. But it was meaningful. That evening I sat on the balcony with a notebook, sketching improvements to the next prototype. Maggie appeared on the path below, carrying a small toolbox. Need any help with that loose railing? She asked. I shook my head. I've got it. Thanks though. She paused, studying me for a moment. Heard through the grapevine that your family's been asking around the harbor about you. Not in a worried way. More like they're trying to piece together a story that still makes sense to them. I set the notebook down. They built one story about me for years. Now the pieces don't fit anymore. Maggie gave a short nod. The ocean teaches you that currents change. People who fight the current usually end up tired. You look like someone who finally stopped fighting the wrong one. Her words stayed with me long after she walked away. A few nights later, my phone rang while I was reviewing data logs. I let it go to voicemail, then played it on speaker. Mom's voice filled the small studio, starting soft and trembling before sharpening into familiar accusation. Alexandra, this has gone on long enough. Your brother says the family reputation is suffering. Your father isn't himself. We raised you better than this silent treatment. Call us back. We need to resolve this like a family. I listened to the entire message twice. Not because it hurt, but because I needed to hear the entitlement running beneath the tears. She didn't miss me. She missed the version of me that never made the family look imperfect. I saved the recording and added it to the folder. Then I turned off the phone and stepped onto the balcony. The moon lit a silver path across the water. For the first time, the silence didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like breathing room I had earned. At the lab the next day, Elena noticed the shift in me. During a break, she handed me a fresh cup of coffee. You're standing taller, she observed. Not physically. In here. She tapped her chest. The work is yours, Alex. The impact is yours. Stop waiting for permission to claim it. I nodded. That afternoon, I finalized the documentation for the new grant. My name appeared clearly on every page, not hidden in acknowledgments, but as the driving force behind the technology. The quiet pride I felt wasn't loud or boastful. It was steady, like the tide that never asked anyone's approval. Through Maggie's subtle coastal connections, I caught fragments of how my absence was rippling through the family. My mother's charity luncheons had become awkward when old friends asked about me. Victor's firm had fielded curious questions after someone mentioned my name in a professional context. Chloe's engagement celebrations carried an undercurrent of tension no one wanted to name. None of it was dramatic collapse. Just the slow exposure of what had always been there, a family system that only worked when I stayed small and quiet. I stopped replying to the messages entirely. Each day, without response, seemed to widen the gap between the story they told themselves and the reality they refused to see. One quiet evening, I sat on the deck with a single notebook, listing the things I had carried for years without acknowledgement. The holidays where I smoothed over tensions, the quiet financial help I had given when no one asked where it came from, the emotional labor of never rocking the boat. I had been the invisible glue. Now the glue was gone, and the pieces were shifting on their own. The conflict wasn't loud shouting or dramatic scenes. It was the steady realization that my leaving had not broken the family. It had simply revealed what had always existed beneath the surface. The knock came just after sunset, when the light over the water had turned soft gold, and the waves sounded louder in the evening quiet. I was sitting on the small balcony reviewing final sensor calibration data when the sound cut through the calm, firm, impatient, familiar. My shoulders tightened for a moment, that old reflex stirring, but I didn't freeze. I stood, walked down the stairs, and opened the door. My mother stood on the wooden steps, coat wrapped tightly despite the mild evening. Her face looked drawn, eyes red-rimmed, hair not quite as perfect as it had been at the brunch. She clutched her purse like a shield. "Alexandra," she said, voice cracking slightly. "We need to talk. This has gone on long enough." I kept one hand on the doorframe. "We're talking now." She glanced past me into the simple studio, the plain furniture, the stacks of research notebooks, the view of the ocean beyond the railing. Judgment flickered across her face, the same look I had seen for years. "Your brother says the family is falling apart," she continued, words coming faster. "Your father isn't sleeping. Chloe's engagement party felt empty without you. People are asking questions. You're punishing all of us for one difficult conversation." I listened without interrupting, the same steady way I monitored delicate equipment during a storm. When she paused, I spoke quietly. "I didn't punish anyone. I left because you told me I no longer exist to this family. In public. At your own birthday brunch." Her mouth opened, then closed. Tears welled up quickly. "We were hurt. You've been so distant for years. We only said those things because we love you and want better for you. Come back. We can fix this. We can be a family again." There it was. Not a real apology. Not acknowledgement of the public humiliation. Just the need for things to return to the way they had always been, with me small, quiet, and fitting their picture. I opened the door a little wider, but stayed in the doorway. I carried a lot for this family, without anyone noticing. The holidays where I smoothed over tension. The quiet help when bills got tight. The emotional weight of never challenging the story you all told about me. I was the one who made sure the family image stayed intact. And when I stopped, you threw me away rather than see who I actually am. Her face crumpled. "You're making this sound worse than it was. We're your family. Families forgive mistakes. Families don't declare their daughter dead in front of strangers," I said, my voice remaining even. "You didn't disown me because I was failing. You did it because I refused to keep shrinking myself to make you comfortable. Now you're feeling the space I used to fill." She reached toward me, fingers trembling. "Please. Your father misses you. We all do. Just come home, and we'll put this behind us." I looked at her hand, then back at her eyes. In that moment, the entire system stood exposed, not broken by my leaving, but finally visible without me there to hide the cracks. The image they protected so carefully had always mattered more than the real person inside it. No, I said. I'm not coming back. I'm not fixing the family image. I'm not stepping into that old role again. What's happening to you now isn't something I did to you. It's what was always there when I stopped absorbing the weight for everyone else. She stared at me, tears falling freely now. For the first time, she seemed to see me not as the disappointing daughter, but as someone who had chosen herself. Her shoulders shook. You're being cruel. I shook my head slowly. I'm finally being honest. Maybe one day we can talk. But it won't be, because you need me to make the family look perfect again. It will be because you've learned to see and respect the woman I actually am. Behind her, Maggie's porch light clicked on. The older woman stepped out briefly, gave a small nod in my direction, then went back inside, a quiet show of support without words. My mother wiped her face, voice dropping to a whisper. This isn't you. It is now, I replied. She stood there a long moment, the evening breeze moving through her hair, then turned and walked back to her car. The engine started, and she drove away too quickly, tires kicking up gravel. I closed the door, leaned against it, and let the adrenaline pass in slow waves. My knees felt unsteady, but I didn't cry. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Maggie, saw her leave. You stood your ground. Proud of you, kid. I sent back a short thank you and set the phone down. Later that night, Dr. Elena Torres called. I put her on speaker while I washed the few dishes from dinner. She didn't ask for every detail. She simply stayed on the line, talking about the latest data trends, letting normal conversation fill the quiet. Her steady presence reminded me I wasn't rebuilding alone. The confrontation didn't bring dramatic apologies or instant change. It brought something quieter and heavier, the clear understanding that the family system had never been about unconditional love. It had been about roles and appearances. And I had finally stepped out of mine completely. I slept that night with the balcony door open, the sound of waves steady and reassuring. The International Ocean Conservation Summit took place in a modern conference center overlooking the harbor, banners fluttering in the sea breeze, and the murmur of scientists, policymakers, and environmental leaders filling the halls. Our team had been invited to present the latest findings from our deep-sea monitoring network. Because the technology was gaining real traction, Dr. Elena Torres asked me to speak during the main session. I almost declined when I learned my family planned to attend a charity luncheon in the same complex as part of their annual coastal preservation gala. Then I remembered the brunch and decided I was done rearranging my life around their discomfort. I wore a simple tailored blazer over a white shirt, my hair pulled back neatly, and my name badge clearly visible. For the first hour, I moved through the crowd with quiet focus, answering questions about sensor deployment, discussing data with researchers from other countries, and helping a young graduate student understand the real-world applications. I was good at this, useful in ways that had nothing to do with performing for my family's approval. Around midday, I saw them across the atrium. My mother stood near a display table for the charity event, smiling tightly while speaking with donors. Victor lingered nearby with Lauren, both of them scanning the room as if searching for something. Chloe was there too, looking polished but uneasy. They hadn't noticed me yet. Then a colleague from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration recognized me and waved me over. Alex Rivera, the lead on the new monitoring array. Your work is changing how we approach coastal resilience. Others joined. Dr. Torres introduced me to a panel of government officials, speaking loudly enough for nearby ears to hear. Alex is the driving force behind the technology. We're fortunate to have her vision guiding this project. The air shifted. I wasn't the disappointing daughter anymore. I was the marine biologist whose systems were being adopted by multiple countries. Public competence carried a weight that no family performance could match. My mother noticed first. Her face went pale, then tight. Victor's conversation stopped mid-sentence. Chloe stared openly. They exchanged glances before my mother approached, moving carefully through the crowd. Alexandra, she said quietly, glancing around to see who might be listening. Can we speak? Somewhere private. I kept my hand steady on the tablet I was holding. We can speak here. She swallowed, eyes flicking to my badge and the group of professionals nearby. Everything at home has been difficult. Your father keeps asking about you. The family feels incomplete. We're sorry about what was said at the brunch. It got out of hand. Victor joined her a moment later, looking more strained than I had ever seen him. Yeah, we didn't know. We had no idea about any of this. The work you're doing, it's impressive. We overreacted. I let their words settle in the bright afternoon light, surrounded by the normal sounds of the summit, presentations echoing from nearby rooms, quiet conversations, the distant call of seabirds. No dramatic scene. No raised voices. Just the truth I had carried quietly for years. You declared me dead to the family in a public restaurant, I said evenly. You told me I no longer existed because I wouldn't live the life you designed for me. That wasn't a difficult conversation. That was you choosing the family image over the real person standing in front of you. My mother's eyes filled. We're family. Families make mistakes and move forward. Families don't erase their daughter because she doesn't fit the picture, I replied. I built something meaningful with my life. Something that actually helps people and protects the ocean. But none of that mattered until it became visible in a way you couldn't ignore. I'm not coming back to the old role. I'm not fixing the family reputation. What happened after I left isn't something I did to you. It's what was already underneath when I stopped hiding who I am. Chloe looked at the ground, shifting uncomfortably. We just want things to go back to normal. I shook my head slowly. Normal for you meant me staying small. I'm not small anymore. Maybe one day we can talk. But it won't be, because you need me to make the family look complete again. It will be because you've learned to see and respect the woman I actually am, not the version you wished I was. Dr. Torres called my name from the presentation area, needing help with the final setup. I turned back to my work without another word. They stood there a moment longer. My mother's shoulders trembling slightly, Victor staring at my badge like he was seeing me for the first time, Chloe quiet and uncertain. Then they walked away, disappearing into the crowd on the other side of the atrium. No big reunion. No tears that erased everything. Just me choosing my own path in full view while they finally understood they were no longer the center of my story. Later, when the summit began to wind down and the harbor lights started to glow, I stood alone near the exit. The sea air felt clean and steady. I pulled out my phone and looked at the old folder filled with screenshots and the voicemail from that night. I listened to my mother's final words from the brunch for 5 seconds, then deleted everything. I didn't need the proof anymore. The consequences had already arrived in their own quiet way. My mother was learning that protecting an image didn't protect real connection. Victor and Chloe were discovering that cruelty dressed as tough love still left marks. And they all now knew I existed as a complete person, not just a supporting role in their narrative. I locked my phone and walked back toward the team packing up equipment. Maggie had texted earlier, simply saying she was proud of how far I had come. Dr. Torres gave me a quiet nod across the hall that said more than words ever could. That evening, back at the studio above the garage, I sat on the balcony with a cup of tea. The waves rolled in steady and unchanging. For the first time since the brunch, the weight in my chest felt truly gone. I used to believe family love was